Guys, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Wrestling Collector Shop. The next time you're looking to add the newest wrestling figures to your lineup, you've got to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Started by collectors for collectors around the globe, Wrestling Collector Shop has been serving fans the latest and greatest in wrestling action figures since 2002. Whether you're looking for basics, elites, or ultimates, Wrestling Collector Shop should be your first stop the next time you're looking for wrestling figures. So make sure to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com and use code SWOGGLE to save yourself 10% on your order. Again, that's 10% off with code SWOGGLE only at WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Hey guys, another episode of Going Postl, and as you see in the title, another small talk. This episode, we have a friend of mine, a podcast connoisseur, an all-around great human being, Conrad Thompson. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Wrestling Collector Shop. Go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com, use promo code SWOGGLE, and save yourself 10%. The free video version of this podcast you can watch at YouTube.com/Dylan Postl, along with road diaries, unboxings, and just other fun videos over at YouTube.com/Dylan Postl. All things me, DylanPostl.com, merchandise, all that jazz, everything you need, DylanPostl.com. My shirts from this podcast that we mentioned, from my wrestling ventures, ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle. And of course, wherever on social media, this podcast at Going Postl Pod, and myself at Dylan Postl on X, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere at Dylan Postl. Be sure to hit that follow button. It's enough of the plugs. Let's go have some fun. Let's go chat with my buddy Conrad. But before we do that, ad break. Are you a fan of Disney, Pixar, Jurassic Park, The Office, or even WWE? Or maybe you just want a sleek and comfortable patterned shirt? Then you need to check out Roosevelts.com. RSVLTS.com today. Roosevelts makes the most eye-catching and comfortable shirts going today. Whether it's button-ups, or polos, or hoodies, or even hats, and everything in between, Roosevelt's truly has something for everyone. Made for those with the love of sports, pop culture, and so much more, and above all else, having a kick-ass time. This clothing is for the bold and fun, for those who dare mighty things. Roosevelts.com, check them out. He's a mortgage broker, a wrestling promoter, which is insane for him to hear, I'm sure. A Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer, the absolute most heartwarming human I've ever been in contact with in my whole life. He is the Podfather, Conrad Thompson. Hi, guy.
Hello, friends. I don't even know what to say to that introduction. How are you, man? Good to see you, bud.
Good. I feel like whenever we catch up, it's an immediate ear-to-ear smile.
Yes.
And just like the best greeting ever. And like, oh man, we could talk yesterday, but still, this is the best day ever.
I feel the same way. You know, I moved to the lake last year, and I've been renovating this house for a few years. But when I first bought it, you and I had a conversation about you bringing your son down fishing, and now I see your son's dunking from the half court line. And it's like, where did the time go?
Yes. It's he was driving me yesterday. He drove me to trap shooting practice yesterday, which is yeah, it's something.
I mean, we need time to slow down, don't we?
We talk about that all the time, and it needs to slow down. But also, like, I really am. If it's between you and me, I'm ready to have him be able to take himself to practice and to work and to those things.
No more taxi dad, which by the way is probably safer for him too, because you are not the real man.
So it seems like we've known each other literally forever.
Yes.
And you remember the first time we met.
But you do not.
I don't.
Yes.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
We were backstage in St. Louis at a Monday Night Raw, and they were promoting that the new Backlash poster or DVD or something was out. And I remember you and I having a conversation that as you looked around catering, you were like, I've been here longer than anyone, almost anyone at this point. And you were just cognizant and out loud about the fact that it's got to be coming to an end soon. I mean, I don't know when, but they can't keep doing this. I'm like, I've been here longer than everybody. And you had no idea. And so when I started doing a podcast later and we reconnected, I was like, we've actually met before. You just don't remember it.
No recollection of that. And that just, it shows kind of like where I was in that time of my career also, of like, I knew I didn't care. I didn't care anymore. I was ready, but also I wasn't ready, obviously, to be done with my dream job. But also I knew the time was coming. Exactly what I said. I knew it had to come. No one deserves it. I just did an interview the other day. No one deserves a job. No one deserves to keep a job, especially a job in the entertainment business forever.
Yeah, I mean, you knew that. You were well grounded. We had a great conversation. And then I was lucky enough to have you meet my daughter, Kansas, and you were so gracious with her back when she was a super wrestling fan for that, 18 months. It was a great time. And she went on and on about how excited she was to meet you, and you just couldn't have been better. But to this day, like the people who made some of the biggest impressions on her, it was Becky Lynch and you and Justin Roberts, and it was so great to have her be involved in this little wrestling family, so to speak.
You talk about your daughter, and I talk about my son, and their love of wrestling, whether it be 18 months or now 15 years for my son.
There you go.
Young Conrad must just be going crazy at current Conrad. Do you ever think about that? Like, man, when you were young and you were watching wrestling in the 1940s, like when Nick Bockwinkel was in his heyday and you were watching in the black and white screen to now, like what do you think? Like, is it just crazy to think about that?
It is. I even showed Kansas my George Hackenschmidt poster that I got in grade school. No, yeah. I've really had a lot of fun, but it is one of those things where if you're not careful, I'm always been a sales guy. So I've always, like, you live and die by the month. You're pushing to see, how big of a number we can have piled in by the end of the month. How many sales can we get on the board and all that sort of thing. So you never spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror, and it's always like, what's next? What's next? What's next? But every now and again where maybe I've had, a special gummy, some chocolate cake, as JR may call it.
A sweet treat, as I call it.
Yeah, there you go. I may actually allow myself to say, did that really happen? Because I do find myself feeling like the Forrest Gump of wrestling quite often.
A movie I've never seen, but I hear about it a lot.
You've never seen Forrest Gump?
Conrad, I just saw my first Tom Cruise movie of my life 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Was it Top Gun?
It was not Top Gun.
What did you see?
It was the one with Dustin Hoffman.
Rain Man.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You just saw Rain Man at 51 years old.
Fuck off! I already used the old joke on you, asshole. Doesn't work.
I grew up watching you, Swoggle. So
I never grew up. I've never seen a Brad Pitt movie. Actually, I saw Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's the only Brad Pitt movie I've ever seen. Never seen a Matt Damon movie. The only Leo DiCaprio movie I saw was Titanic. I've never seen Tom Hanks in anything.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Never saw Wolf of Wall Street?
No.
You would love that movie.
Would I?
That would be your speed. You would love it.
I keep being told that.
You would love
Tom Hanks.
Departed. Wait, you never saw a Tom Hanks movie?
I saw Toy Story and Castaway.
What? I mean, do you have to say, did they have a McDonald's toy And if so, I'll see it. But if they didn't,
very close, very close. It has to be comedy, it has to be Disney, or it has to be Muppets. My only three things I've ever seen. I've seen like very few serious movies. I don't like them. They're a waste of time to me.
Wow.
Like, I don't like them. I don't like them.
I can't believe you've never seen Top Gun. You get into that. You would like that.
Yeah, but it's like, it's kind of like, no, I don't know. It's not funny. It's just like guys fly a plane. Sweet.
Okay. So your favorite wrestling stuff though is always the comedy. It's never the serious stuff.
I like this. That's never been thought about. I like two things. I like deathmatch wrestling and I like spot fests. Those are like what I get into now.
So like your Mount Rushmore is like Necro Butcher.
No.
And okay.
I wouldn't put them on. I like that, but that's a weird thing. Like my easy for me to say. That's why WWE didn't let me talk. Ultimate Warrior, Shawn Michaels.
Wait. Tell me your favorite death match from the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh,
or your favorite
no. My Mount Rushmore is different than what I'm into now.
Oh, I got you. So your taste evolved.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not quite on Dino Nuggets anymore. Now I'm like
Tyson Nuggets.
Yeah. Maybe like the microwavable hot, like the chicken cordon blues, but only the microwavable kind.
How many of your meals do you prepare, like family meals for you and your son? How often is the microwave used? Every meal?
No, we use the air fryer a lot.
Ugh.
I love the air. But I can do no. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking frozen meals. No, I do pork tenderloin in the air fryer. I do chicken in the air fryer.
Buddy,
I don't use.
We did a full remodel here, and we've got literally every stupid ass high end appliance you can imagine in your kitchen.
I know it.
Some of them have the factory plastic on them still because Megan has convinced herself that she's a gourmet chef thanks to the air fryer.
It's the best.
All of my meals come from the air fryer.
Best. I've bought in people air fryers and now they swear by them.
I mean, there's a lot of times where I think I'm going to be grilling and I'll have a show that goes too long. I don't know if you've heard this, but Eric Bischoff likes to talk a lot.
No.
And so sometimes I'll tell her, I'll be done by 1 and I'm done at 3:15. So when I get out there, the meat's already cooked. And I'm like, did she grill this? No grill marks. And I know, this is an air fryer. Special.
I will say, like, if you want a steak,
you need it on a grill.
You have to. Have to. It's just not the same in the air fryer. It doesn't have the same taste, obviously.
No.
The doneness is perfect. Doneness is perfect.
You can get the temperature right, but
it just doesn't have the same.
But listen, in a pinch, a steak in an air fryer with some A1, it could be worse. I mean, it's incredible. It's like an airport steak at that point. It's
Yeah. And still better than using the oven. I love the air fryer. I don't ever use my oven anymore. Ever.
So are you just going to go full Cardona and put like toy shelves where the oven used to be?
No, because he legitimately doesn't know how to use an air fryer, I'm pretty sure. He would pay someone to use the air fryer for him.
It's funny that we're talking about this because just a few minutes ago, he tweeted out that he hates that he was duped into buying stainless steel pans because his eggs keep sticking. And Eric Bischoff quote tweeted it and said, "You just need to turn the heat down lower." And I said to myself, we're seeing too much. Once upon a time, if I wanted to reach out to Hulk Hogan, I had to like write a letter and wait 6 weeks and hope I got something back. And now I know that one of my favorite wrestlers is having trouble with his stainless steel cookware, and a real innovator, the guy who created the NWO, gave him the pro tip.
Also, Matt Cardona is famously known, when he lived with Kurt Hawkins, to eat the eggs that he made out of the pan. Because, and I quote, "If I put them on a plate, they will get too cold." They will get too cold.
Well, this is a guy who, if he could, would eat all of his meals at Roost Chris because they've got the warm plate, And he's got those fancy tastes as the king of the indies. He can swing the Roost Chris lifestyle.
Just ask him. He'll tell you.
Well, yeah. Wait. We've got a live stream of the framing going up on his new mansion.
Right. Yeah.
Wait. He's having a beef now with the solar panel people. That's the feud of the year. That's the WrestleCon match of the year right there.
Wait, does that framing work have ZR on it? Yes, it does, folks.
Because those boards were born ready. They're all
This is already my favorite episode, and we've gotten to do literally nothing. This is the best.
Is he like serious business? I know we love busting his balls, but that's what we do to our friends. What a fucking innovator that dude is, to still be doing the indie god thing all these years later and still making more money than everyone else on the indies. Like, normally when a guy has a great indie run, it's like for a year. This dude's been doing it for years at this point and still working at a high level.
Correct. Let me ask you this, and maybe I'm a tad jealous of his run, but is being the indie god a good thing?
Compared to what? Not getting booked? I think it's great.
Correct. That, yes. But is it I don't know how to say this.
My point is, here's what I love and respect about Matt Cardona. And I know we've been busting balls, but I'm being sincere.
Yeah.
I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit, because I myself, and I know this sounds crazy, I had a job when I was 14, but by the time I could drive, I was a commissioned only salesperson. From then on, I've sort of fancied myself an entrepreneur. So I've not ever had a job where I know I'm going to get this amount of money every Friday or every 2 weeks or once a month. And I love when motherfuckers bet on themselves. And I don't think anybody has done that publicly or in a bigger way outside the confines of WWE or AEW or TNA or all that better than Cardona. So I just have such admiration and appreciation that he's shown people, hey guys, a lot of you think working on the indies is a pay cut and it's a downgrade and it's not the ultimate goal, but it is what you make it. You can make as much money and have as much success as you want doing this. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because most people, when they go to the indies, they feel like they're on their way up or they're on their way down. But man, if you take ownership on it and you're like, no, this is my business, Cardona's done that as good or better than anybody ever. I respect the hell out of him.
He has really pushed it too, and pushed it and made it a second. I mean, he's made it a whole second career in all reality.
I would argue that he's had more success with this than he did his first. I know he's making more money. So it's like, if you're in total control, and really, here's what people don't think about on the indies, because I know there's a lot of people who think that's a bad word and that means you haven't made it. When you work for a major company, they tell you when to be there, what time to be there, what you're doing, what hotel you're staying at, sometimes always what flight you're on. But when you're on the indies, you can say, okay, here's who I want to work with. Here's the flight I want. Here's the hotel I'll stay at. Pick me up at the airport. I'm going to sell. You're in control. And I just love the idea that he's not being dictated to. My man
favorite
gets to do
thing,
what he wants to do. That's badass.
I'm my own boss. If I want to work, I can work. If I want to be home and go to Disney, I can go to Disney. Like, that's the best part of this.
And he's got a smoking hot wife who makes a bunch of money too. Roll Tide.
Makes a ton of money on television all the time and has toys of herself, which he loves.
Now that I'm thinking about this, I was just putting him over. Fuck you, Matt Cardona. Too much good shit's happening to you.
Too much. It's too much.
We got to level it out.
He's a piece of shit.
You stub your big toe, you nothing happening son of a bitch.
Keep that oven and stove on high and burn those eggs, idiot.
Burn the fuck out of them. I'm glad you fucked your eggs up. Yeah. And I hope your Freeman gets termites. Not really. Not really.
I kind of really hope that happens, just to see the tweet about it.
You know, he didn't use me for the mortgage though. So
of course.
Termites. If he invites me over, maybe I slide some by the front door. I don't know. We'll see.
There might just be some shingles taken off that roof.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe. I hope your solar panels never work.
Holy shit. Speaking of indies and independent wrestling, I have a fun story that I don't think I've even talked to many people about at all. You graced my presence and with showing up WrestleMania week to one of my matches.
I love it.
On that show, I remember sitting by you afterwards, and you put over another wrestler at the time, and that was a young Ethan Page.
Yes.
That you at that time you put him over, and I remember saying to our friend Julian, "Man, Conrad Thompson really likes you." He goes, "What? Yeah. He does? He really?" Yeah. And then I introduced you guys, and still to this day, it's something that, like, I think he holds close to him because he didn't. I mean, he was just an indie guy then. Yeah, he was one of the big indie guys at the time, but no one knew what he would become. Whether it was moving then to TNA, his huge run in AEW, and now what he's doing now, obviously becoming one of the biggest stars in NXT. And let's be honest, it'll be main roster very soon. So but you were always a supporter of independent, and my stuff at least, and independent wrestling. You seem to have kept up on what was going on. Is that just because of your love of wrestling all around?
Yeah, it is my love of wrestling, but I also know that there is a lot of great talent that never really got an opportunity because no one was sort of campaigning or championing them. A guy like a Reckless Youth. I mean, that predates my involvement in pro wrestling at all.
That's the best.
But like, he could have made it. He could have been a big star. And there's a whole lot of guys who are like that. So I remember that indie show in particular we're talking about. I was blown away by Eddie Kingston. I've always loved Eddie's promos and stuff, but he wrestled a Japanese legend whose name I forget right now, but I just remember being really impressed by him. I thought Mance Warner's entrance was one of the greatest things I'd ever seen. I was a big fan of Ethan Page, and you and I that day, I remember specifically having a conversation about Jordan Grace. And now take a look a few years later, Mance is with TNA, Eddie's with AEW, Jordan Grace is now with NXT, Ethan Page is in NXT. Like, it all happened. And I want to, if I can add any positivity or any value to wrestling, it's getting people to introduce people to see new things and take a shot on things. Like even Bruce sort of pre-podcast and post-podcast, all we did was let people hear how great Bruce really was. We always knew, but the masses didn't know. There was a narrative out there. And I think sometimes people think, well, if they're on an indie show, they're not very good, because if they were very good, it's like, wait, hang on. Do you realize that every wrestler you see on TV was once on an indie show? Like, don't just immediately throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Isn't that kind of crazy? Let's think about 10 years ago in wrestling.
Yes.
No independence, really. Like no one from the indies. You know what I mean? Like, and then there's just been this surge of like indie wrestling being cool. And indie wrestling being what it should be. There should be a developmental. But what's under the developmental? Independent wrestling. That's what everything should be. And now it's like, man, you look at all of the rosters, and it's 90% independent wrestlers from the last 10, 15 years.
I think a lot of it parallels comedy. Like, I'm not as plugged in the comedy world as I am in pro wrestling. But you start to hear buzz about certain comedians, and then the next thing you know, they're blowing up. Like, I was on the Nate Bargatze bandwagon like 8 years ago, and now he's the biggest comedian in the world. Like, he sold more tickets, generated more revenue than anybody. But I was a fan of him like 8 years ago. He was working the little tiny comedy club here in Huntsville, Stand Up Live, like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's unfathomable to think that my dude's selling out arenas back-to-back nights.
Yep.
And he was not even packing 400 seats 8 years ago. And it's not because his talent wasn't there. People just didn't know. And I think that's kind of the same thing with indie wrestling. Like, you will see guys and be like, well, he's going to be a huge star. Maybe everybody doesn't see it, but if you believe that he will be, you're probably right. And you get to see the future stars today. And that's really how I have some of the relationships. Like even Cody Rhodes, and boy, you used to bust my balls about my friendship with Cody. I knew like this dude's going to be a big star. I don't know that everybody saw that, but I just knew the way he approached the business and his mentality and his mindset, he's going to make it. And he did. So yeah, I'm always going to love indie wrestling. And if there was an indie show near my house this weekend, I would go.
Here's a question for you. Have you, with all these podcasts you do and being an absolute maniac with your schedule and the busiest man on the planet when it comes to recording, when it comes to real job and real life, have you or when did you feel yourself ever fall out of love with wrestling?
I think you love it differently. So once upon a time, I never missed a Monday Night Raw or a SmackDown or a Dynamite or a Collision. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, you know, I work all day like most people do, and so does my wife. And so the time we get to spend together is really from like 6 to 9 at night. And then she's got to go to bed because she's still chasing her fitness dreams, and she's got to get up at 4 and go do all that stuff. So if I'm going to spend time with her, I'm not going to make her sit down and watch the latest on TNA wrestling, or let's see what they're doing in AEW this week. So I'll wind up watching it differently. So I'm not watching it live most of the time. That's our time together. And I want to eat dinner with her and watch whatever movie. Like we watched, believe it or not, we watched a Pam Anderson movie last night, and I thought it was an interesting idea. It was on Amazon called The Last Showgirl. And within the first 4 minutes, you see Dave Bautista in it. And I felt guilty, and I turned and I go, I had no idea. I did not know.
First off, Pam Anderson. Second off, Batista. Yeah.
So she's just like, really? But anyway, it was a great movie. But I just don't want her. Her whole life has been wrestling. Yeah. And wrestling was not always a positive thing in her life. Wrestling sort of took her dad away from her, and her brother, I don't think, had the best experience in wrestling. And obviously, her sisters had ups and downs in wrestling. So I'm sure she just wants to escape it. And what a rib, when she gets with the mortgage guy, because we started dating on the day that Something to Wrestle debuted. So she knew that I knew her dad, and we did a little podcast here or there. But when Something to Wrestle starts, obviously that's when it really took off.
Yeah.
And I went from kind of, I did a show every now and again to, well, it's 5 days a week and we're doing tours and all the craziness. So I'm sure she feels like this is not exactly what I signed up for. So I'm not just making her watch wrestling all the time. So like if, when you finally get down to the lake, you see behind me, there's no wrestling stuff. Like I still have all the stuff, but it's just not displayed. There's not wrestling all over the house because I want this to just be our house. And so I just like it differently. And so I'm still all into it. I'm talking to Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff and some of my friends in wrestling every single day. And we're brainstorming ideas in and out of wrestling. But yeah, I definitely love it differently. I don't get as excited about sitting in the crowd and watching a match. I'm more interested in seeing how the crowd's responding. I'm more interested in learning what works and how it works and why it works, more so than seeing what exactly is happening. So it's more of a cause and effect, and I find myself wanting to learn more, if that makes sense.
What is something lately that you can like pinpoint of what brought you back into loving wrestling?
Listen, I tweeted just before the Elimination Chamber, boy, John Cena turning heel tonight would be legendary. And it wasn't because I had any sort of inside information or talked to Cody or Bruce or anything like that. I don't even know how closely guarded of a secret that was. But I just remember thinking, hey, how are they going to do that? Babyface versus babyface at WrestleMania. It didn't really work the way they wanted it to, I don't think, with Hogan and Warrior. It didn't really work the way they wanted it to with Brett and Shawn. And even when they tried to do babyface versus heel, but it was a legend and Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, that didn't really work the way they wanted either.
It flipped everything.
And so now if we know that John Cena is really leaving at the end of the year, and we know that Cody's the biggest merch mover now, he's sort of the new John Cena, the only thing that makes sense is to turn Cena heel. But will they actually do it? And I know that the person dragging their feet on that this whole time allegedly was Vince McMahon. And if he's out of the tent and he's out of the way, this would be the night to do it. Because I don't want, I would, if I was Cody, I don't think I would want the crowd to be wanting to see Cena beat me. Like that feels like you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I get why the match makes sense and people want to do it. And I know Cody's favorite match of all time is Hogan and Rock at WrestleMania just because of the crowd reaction. So I know he wants that, but how do we get there without jeopardizing his run? So I thought they had to turn him heel. So that's probably the biggest thing I've had my wheels turning about this year.
Do you see the crowd turning?
I know that there will be fans who want to see John Cena win at his last WrestleMania.
Yes.
And I could even get behind the idea that somehow Cody does get screwed and he loses the belt, because now it sets up a big return at a SummerSlam or some international pay-per-view. I totally get that. I don't think there's any chance they finish John Cena's run with him as a heel, though.
I think SummerSlam he's babyface. I think I would say SummerSlam he's back to babyface and ends the year like that.
I don't think I would do it at SummerSlam. I mean, maybe they will, but I would definitely do it in the fall. Yeah.
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 Lana and I were talking Landon is at that age. It's funny because I see so much of me and him at this age when it comes to wrestling and just personality and sarcasm. Makes me happy, yet I hate it all in one. But he was fantasy booking everything. He goes, man, and then we were talking. I said, it would be awesome if they ran back Cena and Punk at Money in the Bank. That's like, if you're gonna do Cena and Punk, you do it at Money. You do it at Money in the Bank. It's Cena's biggest.
Is that in Chicago?
I don't think so. I think
you have to have the Cena Punk thing happen in Chicago, but this time with Cena as a heel.
I think it's definitely Cena as a heel. I just immediately thought Money in the Bank because it was like, Money in the Bank was in Chicago. You're right. But I was like, that's the biggest, to me, that's Cena's biggest, like, thought about and talked about match, I would say.
It's up there. I mean, he's also got to wrestle The Rock. I know nobody's
think so? I don't think it happens.
I think you have to.
I think Orton is his last.
You do it in a tag match. If that makes sense.
Okay, yep. I think Orton's his last.
Well, I could see that.
I bet that's his last.
I could see that. That'd be cool.
Because
they haven't really got Orton tuned up too much. I mean, since he's been back, they haven't given him a lot of juicy stuff. So he's got to have. Yeah, you're right. He's got to do stuff.
Here's a question to think about. When was the time in all of your podcast stuff? Now you talk about 80. You have the 83 week shows, but you have about 87 shows. Period. It seems. When during all of it was the time where you finally felt like, I think we got something here? Was it during something to wrestle with? Was it later? Has it been different for really each show? Like when did you feel okay, I think this will work, this whole podcasting thing?
Boy, this is going to sound like an asshole answer, but when Bruce cried the first time for real.
Yeah, that's not an asshole answer.
I realize this is not just because, listen, the stuff that you and I and just all wrestling fans gravitate to is when we feel like, okay, I know that's all bullshit, but this was real. And I feel like sometimes on a podcast, people are, they compare it to a shoot interview, which I get why that would be a comparison. But for so many years, shoot interviews were just, and this is the way people in wrestling talk. Everybody's just burying everybody. Nothing's complimentary. Nothing's real. Nothing's genuine. But I knew the real, genuine Bruce. And when he was willing to be vulnerable and share that pierces through. I mean, I just did an interview with D'Lo a couple of weeks ago. It's my first time really talking to D'Lo. And we started talking about draws. And it's hard to have that conversation because I wanted to say the quiet part out loud that a lot of people have thought, but it feels distasteful to say. We know the tragedy that occurred and the price that Draws paid and just how bad that had to be for him physically and forever changed his life. But what no one ever talked about was mentally the toll it had to take on D'Lo. And I've had physical pain and I've had mental pain, and there is no comparison. The mental pain is way worse. I can't escape myself. I can take something or prop something up or lean a certain way, and I can get a little bit of relief from physical pain. But how do we escape our own head? And the idea, when I said that, I felt like it was maybe one of the first times anybody had communicated that to D'Lo in an interview type segment. And he was able to share with me, his goal, if he's ever fortunate enough to be welcomed into the WWE Hall of Fame, he wants Draws to be inducted with him. And even now I've got like the chicken skin on my arms because it's like, man, that's real. Like all the other, who's going to win WrestleMania? That's bullshit. That's not, but this is real. And those real moments that we had with Bruce early on was like, oh, this is just like wrestling, in that we're going to tell some silly stories and we're going to say chocolate titties and do dumb stuff. But then when we have a real moment, that's what makes it. That's what people will remember. And so when we won the ESPN Podcast of the Year, they talked about the interview we did or the podcast we did about Roddy Piper. And when Bruce got choked up, and I didn't try to fill the space. I didn't try to cover it up. I just, to use an announcer term, laid out because I wanted the audience to understand, hey, this is the way Bruce really felt about this guy. He's remembering his friend and it's tough and he's doing his best and he's gutting it through. But when the realism came through and Bruce's voice was cracking, it was like, oh damn, this is not just a shoot interview. This is real emotion.
Everyone wants the peek behind the curtain.
Yes.
And that's what podcasts and that are meant to do now, to an aspect. But exactly what you said, when you get that peek behind the curtain, but also when you kind of get a peek inside the household of the person and the real human, not just booker, promoter, writer, producer Bruce. You see Bruce, like,
yes,
that's where you really get the people. And I think that's where you really hook them and you really make them a listener, an avid listener, because now you're not just giving them a story they can get anywhere, possibly. You're giving them a different version of that person.
Because it's real, and that's what we all want to know is, nobody wants to be worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Why, there's people in the wrestling space who still to this day believe the Montreal Screwjob was a work because they want to say that. So if it ever comes out, they can be like, I told you so. I knew it.
Exactly.
I called it.
Exactly.
But when you sort of put all that down and we can just be real people, boy, that sounded like an intro for the real world. You get where I'm going. I just feel like, man, if they can ever get to know the real Bruce, I mean, I've always said in business, people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. Like if you were to say, hey man, if I told you, man, I'm having a problem with a plumbing issue, I've got something in the yard that needs help. If you go, oh, I got a guy, I don't need to know anything else. You're vouching for him and you're saying, this is my guy and this is who I would call. I know, like, and trust you. So I know that your guy is the guy. I'm not going to talk to anybody else. I'm not going to let anybody else quote it. I'm just calling your guy because I trust you and I know you and I like you. And I wanted people to know, like, and trust Bruce. And I felt like when he was vulnerable, and Jeff Jarrett's done a fabulous job of that, I totally changed my opinion on Bruce and on Jeff. And I think that's the mark of, an evolved human being, when you can be real.
Did you have that mindset when starting these shows? I mean, like a Tony Schiavone. I will say this: Tony Schiavone is an absolute star in the wrestling business, and a absolute gem, and will go down in history in the wrestling business. I will also say this: you will not accept this. I know you won't. You made Tony Schiavone. You gave Tony Schiavone a second life, legitimately. Do you have it in your mind ever of, I love this person. More people need to love this person. I know this person. You just said it about Bruce. You love Bruce. You want people to know the real Bruce, so they love Bruce for Bruce.
Yes.
Has that been in your mind when you've had these the co-hosts that you've had, or is it kind of just like I want to get these stories out? You know what I mean? Does that? Am I asking it the right way? I don't know if I am.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I definitely at first wanted to get the stories out, and that was my motivation with Bruce and Tony. What I wasn't prepared for is how it would change the narrative. I mean, you mentioned Schiavone, and for years, wrestling fans by and large thought he was this old, bitter, angry wrestling announcer who hated wrestling and hated wrestling fans. Yeah. And that wasn't true. He just didn't have the proper ending, and he's entitled to his feelings, and he felt like the wrestling business gave him the shaft.
Yeah.
And that's hard to argue when, respectfully, you go from making great money to all of a sudden, well, I'm calling minor league baseball and working at an AM station and pouring coffee at Starbucks. How would anybody in that circumstance not be pissed off and angry at wrestling? But when people actually gave him a shot and learned his real personality was more of a Bob Saget, in that, yes, we saw him as our TV dad, but in real life, he uses the F word like a comma. He's one of us. He's our guy.
Exactly.
And so I was delighted to see that it had that effect for Bruce. It had it for Tony. I think it's had it for Jeff. And I think it's happening with JBL while JBL is standing in for Bruce right now, because you and I have always known JBL to be who we know him to be. But if you just believe what you've read on the internet, you'd be led to believe that he is a different human being from who he is. Is he perfect? No. Has he made mistakes and been an asshole at times? Sure. But who amongst us hasn't?
That's just it.
Yeah, those people who know him, he's perceived differently. And I'm glad that the world gets to see some of that now.
Hawkins now goes, oh, my friend John, which 5 years ago, he would have never said that.
Yes.
Now, like, he's getting to know JBL at TNA. I've gotten to know JBL, post WWE, and hung out with him more. And we have him coming in for Water City Wrestling Con. We're doing a Beers with Bradshaw show. And it's like, man, he's just, if you take your narrative away from someone and just like make your own with that person, it's great. It's great. That's all you have to do. Why are you letting someone else's written narrative be your opinion on someone?
I'm glad you said that, because I think I was on recently on Richard Deiss's podcast with The Athletic, and he said, is there a great podcast out there that you'd like to do with someone who is like sort of the great white? And I said, well, listen, everybody wants to do a Paul Heyman podcast. And when he's finished with WWE, that would be tremendous. I think Michael Hayes would have another fabulous podcast when he's finished with WWE. But right now, today, I think the biggest opportunity, and I don't think there's even a close second, is Tony Khan. I don't know how much time you've spent with Tony, but the internet narrative on Tony is totally different from real life Tony.
Yeah.
And I think where people sometimes go online and are quick to shit on Tony, if they really listened to Tony and got to know Tony, not when he's in pay-per-view shill mode, because he's a businessman. And whenever he's doing a press conference or a presser in advance of a pay-per-view, he's trying to celebrate the success of his business. He's not able to really just let you in and talk about wrestling. But I had a conversation with him briefly in Atlanta earlier this year. And man, he couldn't wait to tell me, I just went through and I watched some of the promos from Rick's first run in the WWF in 92. And man, they did a great angle where he was wrestling Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and he'd worked the knee over the whole time and won with the figure 4. And then the Beverly Brothers came in and picked the bones afterwards. But his passion for pro wrestling was so evident. It's like, man, if the internet wrestling community who's decided they hate Tony Khan could hear this conversation, they would know he's just one of us. He's a super wrestling fan.
Exactly.
He's just lucky enough to have the ability to extend opportunities to wrestlers. And maybe you would do it differently, but I think you would like the person if you got to know him. I think Tony Khan could totally change the narrative on himself and AEW if there were a Tony Khan podcast, because he's a great dude who loves wrestling just like you and I.
You get like a Sunday evening conversation with Tony Khan, a little relaxed, a little just talking about love of pro wrestling.
Yes.
And like, not about, hey, what is Thunder Rosa and Britt doing this week? No, you don't need to.
I don't want him to go into full blown 4 big matches this week on Dynamite.
I want to hear about, hey, what did you think about the Steiners versus the Head Shrinkers back in the day?
Come on.
That's what I want.
And he has opinions on that, but we've just never heard them. And I think Tony Khan, if he ever allows himself to just talk as a wrestling fan consistently and publicly enough, all of us will be like, hey, he's just one of us. He's doing his best.
Exactly.
Get off his back.
All right. As we wrap up here, I always ask the same question to every guest that I've ever had on this show, from our friend Eric Bischoff to our other friend JBL to Kofi Kingston and everyone in between. Conrad Thompson, I live for pinch me moments in life, in wrestling, in all that. Give me a couple of your pinch me moments. Give me a wrestling one. Give me during all of your, things with the podcasts and in wrestling and all of that, something maybe real life that has, been a part of the wrestling, or give me a couple of your pinch me moments.
I got to go to WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans as a guest of Ric Flair, and he took me backstage for the first time to a WWE show. And I got to meet Stone Cold and The Rock and Roddy Piper, and I got photos with all those people, and Ric Flair was the cameraman. That was pretty pinch me.
Going where you were with that was amazing. The payoff of Ric Flair was the cameraman is the whipped cream and cherry on top.
I mean, it seems surreal, but I got to meet everybody that weekend, and it was because of him. And even more surreal, I didn't even really know her at the time. I'd only met her once. But legitimately, when Rick goes to The Rock's dressing room After they exchange pleasantries, oh man, how are you? Good to see you. So glad you came by. The very first thing Rock says is, how's Megan? Because what people don't think about is, they're both kids going to the matches together as young people. And yeah, so that was a pinch me moment going backstage at WrestleMania. Another would be, as a wrestling fan, I guess prior to that, One Night Stand, the very first one in 2005. I was such a big ECW fan. I couldn't believe that I had this shot at closure and this was going to be the last ECW show and I get to be here.
Is that how? So Hawkins is a huge ECW guy. I've went on record and said I am not an ECW guy at all. Never was. Is that show, was that taken that way by most ECW diehards? That was the closure of that was, all right, you know what? We get our night finally.
It felt like, I'll be honest, this is embarrassing to admit in public. But when you were a little kid, didn't you imagine by the time you and I were in our 40s, time travel would be possible? Hollywood had convinced us that by now we'd have flying cars and we could definitely time travel.
Yep.
And so I just think, man, in an alternate universe, I would love to go back and be in the crowd for WrestleMania 3 or some of those big moments like that. But we didn't get that opportunity. But this One Night Stand 2005, the very first one in June, felt like as close as we're ever going to get to a time machine. And I was 20, I was 23, and tickets were $1,000 for ringside, and people thought that was crazy, like higher than WrestleMania. But I could not wait to buy those tickets. They couldn't take my $2,000 fast enough for me and my best wrestling buddy Warren to go, because this was like the wrestling equivalent of a real life time machine. So that's what it was for me. And then I had it again at All In, because I just never imagined we would be in an arena in America, not at a WWE show, that full. And to know that, I at least had a small part to do with that was just, this feels surreal and crazy. And the most recent one, I guess, is when they're playing Rick's music at Ric Flair's last match and the lights come down and the video's playing. And when the music hits and the crowd goes bananas. And I know that pay-per-view was criticized online and I get it, but in the building that night, everybody had the goosebumps, and my wife reaches down and grabs my hand and gives me a little squeeze. And it's kind of surreal as I look around and think, I had this idea with my buddy Dylan in a bar in Wisconsin, and now this shit is happening on pay-per-view and everyone's watching it. And the greatest wrestler of all time is having his last match. And I was somehow involved in that. It was the most surreal pinch me moment of my wrestling fandom for sure.
Can't get better than that. That's all we got. Guys, let's talk about Mad Cat Beard Care. They make my beard feel soft, silky smooth, and they can do the same for yours. A one-man show since 2019, Mad Cat uses a portion of their sales to care for local stray cats. That money covers their medical bills and finds them safe spaces and forever homes. Their products are made to order with vitamins and all-natural oils that promote strong, healthy hair and moisturize your skin as well. They've got exclusive scents for myself, as well as other wrestlers like my good pal Brian Myers, Mr. Kennedy, and Ring of Honor legend Delirious. Make sure to check out all of their scents, along with my Swoggled scent, which has notes of lavender and sage. I absolutely love this scent. And guys, we've got an exclusive offer for listeners of Going Postl. Use promo code SWOGGLED to save yourself 15% on your orders only at madcatbeardcare.com. That is Swoggled with a D on the end to save yourself 15% on your orders at madcatbeardcare.com. Guys, that's 15% with promo code SWOGGLed. And remember, the Mad Cat makes a happy beard. Conrad, I cannot thank you enough. It was just, I love talking to that guy. It always brings a smile to my face, whether it's a phone call when I see his name pop up, a text message, anything. And so getting to sit down with him for as long as we did really, really was an awesome, awesome time. Really got to the heart of the matter on a lot of things. And it was just such a fun catch up with a good buddy of mine. So thank you all for listening to this episode of Going Postl. But before we go, make sure to follow this pod as well as me on all forms of social media. This pod at Going Postl Pod and myself at Dylan Postl. And also ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle for all of my awesome t-shirt designs. That's all I got though, friends. We'll see you soon.